Beautiful. Hello, everybody. All the happy Hawaiians. So nice to see them. So you wanted to do something? Say something?
Say something too.
Okay, please.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep this real short, but thanks everybody for coming out, and of course thank you Bob and Nana for making the long trip to Wood Valley. We were talking with Bob last night, just going over some of his illustrious background, and basically he was one of the early Westerners that started studying Buddhism, like back in the early 60s, maybe the early 60s. And he started studying in New Jersey with the Lama Geshe Wangyal, where he learned Tibetan. And he learned it like very, very quickly, like in a matter of about 8 weeks. Like incredible. And so, and then he was the first Westerner to take ordination with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And and he has remained friends with His Holiness for 59 years. And he's also like a very good friend and supporter of Nechung Monastery in exile in Dharamsala as well. So we're just really happy that you finally made it here, and we hope that you'll come many times in the future. So I know you guys probably know a lot about Bob Thurman, and then also Nana. She really is the support of a lot of Bob's activities and endeavors, like Tibet House in New York City, and Menla, the retreat and spa, and Upstate. She does a lot of that background work very quietly, so thank you. And also, she was a very famous international model.
Many of them.
And I'm sure you know their daughter, Uma Thurman. So anyway, that said, I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Shall we go ahead?
Yes, please.
You want to say something? Okay.
No, I'm good, Bob.
Okay.
We're going to start off with reading the Refuge and the Heart Sutra, which Bob will lead.
All right. I'm sorry we won't do the whole Tara Puja that you would normally do, just because of time. So we'll start out with the Refuge, maybe reading it in English, since we are most of us English speakers. Okay? So shall we read it together in the English part?
Page 1.
I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. By practicing giving and other perfections, may I attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. By practicing giving and other perfections, may I attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge till I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. By practicing giving and other transcendences, may I attain the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Okay. Then we go to Heart Sutra.
Page
And
35.
we'll do some commentaries, but later. About myself before.
Page 35.
Heart Sutra.
Sumchasonga. 35.
Sorry, let's talk.
35.
What, 25?
No,
30.
30.
35.
Okay. Okay. 30 something. What is it right now? Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll also read this in English. Okay? To the excellent three jewels we prostrate. Well, we did that. Thus have I heard. Once the Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain, monks and bodhisattvas, read the monks and bodhisattvas, by the way. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi, established the darkness called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara and Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the profound practice of transcendent knowledge, saw the 5 skandhas and their natural emptiness, and through the inspiration of the Buddha, Shariputra said to Avalokiteshvara, how should these noble ones learn who wish to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge? Bodhisattva is in Mahabodhisattva Avalokiteshvara answered Shariputra, whoever wishes to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge should look at it like this. See the five skandhas and their natural emptiness. Form is emptiness. Emptiness itself is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, action, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus all dharmas are emptiness and have no characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, since there is emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no conception, no action, no consciousness, no eye, no nose, no ear, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no object of mind, no quality of sight, no quality of knowing, no quality of smelling, no quality of tasting, no quality of sensing, no quality of thought, no quality of mind consciousness. There are no nidanas from links from ignorance to old age and death, nor their wearing out. There is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no ending of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, since there is no attainment, the bodhisattvas abide by means of transcendent knowledge. And since there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear. They transcend falsity and pass beyond the bounds of sorrow. All the Buddhas who dwell in the past, present, and future, by means of transcendent knowledge, full and clearly awakened to unsurpassed through the complete attainment. Therefore, the mantra of transcendent knowledge, the mantra of deep insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra, the mantra which cleanses all suffering, which destroys all suffering, should be known for truth, for there is no deception in transcendent knowledge. The mantra is proclaimed. Talyata Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisattva. Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should learn profound transcendent knowledge. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, saying, Good, O son of noble family, profound transcendent knowledge should be possessed just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, that whole gathering and the world with its gods, humans, asuras, their hearts full of joy, praise the words of the Blessed One. Okay, and then what you're supposed to do is clap 3 times. Clap, clap, clap. And the reason for that, and why His Holiness always begins the Heart Sutra, and plus always ends and everyone does, is that bad spirits, demons, and bad moods don't like the Heart Sutra. So then they leave. But just in case there's any hard cases, clapping is supposed to drive them away. When the British invaded Lhasa in 1904, and they, after killing quite a few Tibetans with their Gatling guns, they marched into Lhasa and the Tibetans were all clapping. So they thought, oh, they changed their mind, they really like us. They didn't know that was the last ditch defense. Anyway, so the clapping was good. But now His Holiness doesn't like that anymore. When you do rituals, or like initiations and things, you offer a small dorma, a small little cake, to the local spirits, not to leave, so that they won't interfere with the ritual. But His Holiness doesn't like that now, and the older monks are annoyed with him because he says, "Don't do that. Let them stay. They need teaching too." And they almost no, and they take it. They run out with a little dorma and they give it to them to leave. But he says, "Why am I kicking them out? The bad guys are the ones who want to get them to shape up." His Holiness is so cool nowadays. So first I wanted to discuss about refuge. Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, right? And I think you should know that the Buddha, that His Holiness, he has a very strong vow, which is something very new in a way in the history of Buddhism, which is he doesn't want to convert anybody to Buddhism. And he strictly says, "I have never in my whole career given a general lecture to a general audience with the motive of making anybody become a Buddhist," he says. He's very, very clear about this. You can find it on tape, on YouTube, wherever you like, you can find it. And he has also told 3 popes, many Protestant ministers, many Muslim mullahs in India, where he has met them, and in Jordan, which is one Muslim country he has visited. And also, he loves the rabbis because they don't try to convert you. You have to be born that way, supposedly, or marry someone. And he likes that. And he thinks it's too late in history for religions to compete for market share. On the other hand, he thinks everybody should learn everything from each other. And so he's happy that people learn to meditate, or they learn the philosophy, or they learn about emptiness. And he thinks that's very, very good. And therefore, but they should keep what they learn and what they realize in terms of whatever their grandmother's religion is. So keep grandma's religious forms, he says. And otherwise, grandma will be unhappy when you come home and say, "I'm a Buddhist, grandma." She thinks you're doomed, depending on whichever version she's in. So we love Jew-Booze. I once gave a lecture, the Pritzker lecture in San Francisco to the Jewish Community Center, and I had 40 rabbis in a row. But I actually got them to laugh. As I said, "Rabbis, don't be upset when your member of your synagogue comes back on that day, the Sabbath, and says, 'Rabbi, I'm a Jew, boo.'" And I said, "That's fine, because they're still Jews." And even my friend Yitz Greenberg, very Orthodox rabbi, said, "We don't mind if they do Buddhism, as long as their feet are nailed to the synagogue floor." So that's fine, I said, and believe me, if they come in one day, though, and say, "I won't be seeing you, Rabbi, because I'm not the Jew anymore, I'm just a boo," then you can come and complain to me, I told them. Then they actually did laugh. They all laughed. So that's one point I want to say. Now, the way you can take refuge then, in His Holiness's New Age, let's not have religious wars theory and practice, is you can go to the highest meaning of the word Dharma. Dharma has 11 meanings according to Vasubandhu, the great philosopher of the 5th century of the Common Era. And all the way to when they say all dharmas or this and that, which it said in the Sutra here, that doesn't mean the Dharma as the teaching. That means the Dharma as a thing. And because the Dharma comes from the verb dhir in Sanskrit, which means to hold something. And so Lakshana Dharanati di Dharma is one of the definitions of Dharma, the most basic one, which means a thing is something that holds its own defining characteristic. Like a table. So it has the definition of having some legs and a surface, or whatever, then it holds that thing. So that's when they say all dharmas are this and that, but they mean it's all things. But of course, your academic translators don't want to say things. It's a bring down for them, so they always say all phenomena. And that sounds like they're being technical, which is really silly. It's like so many extra syllables, and also it's wrong, because one of the dharmas is nirvana. which is not a phenomenon, because nirvana doesn't appear to you. You are nirvana, so if you attain it, it's one of the biggest letdowns in world history, in case you attain nirvana. When you, if ever you do attain nirvana, and maybe many of you already have, I don't know, because there's no attainment and no non-attainment, however. So the point is, it's a big letdown, because it's the ultimate, I already knew that. Experience. Because when you attain nirvana, it's a realization that you were always there. And you just didn't notice it. You didn't persuade yourself of that. You just thought you were like, you didn't have enough. That's as we usually feel, don't we? Okay, so therefore, if you look at what Dharma is, in its highest meaning, is reality itself. Because, newsflash, the Buddha's teaching is really the third noble truth. Why everybody likes Buddha? Because Buddha discovered that everything is all right. It's fine. It's cool. The reality of it is we're all in nirvana right here and now. We're not going to find anything else someplace over on the other side of the island. It's not going to be more nirvana than here. The ultimate third noble truth is the real discovery. You don't have to be a Buddha to discover suffering. Did you notice? We all managed that. Every time we didn't get enough nursing, we were, So everyone knows about suffering. But the third noble truth, freedom from suffering, cessation of suffering, that's the discovery. And that's a complete, you know what I mean? Free pass, free ticket. It's all fine. That was his discovery. Then some people, they couldn't understand that or would misunderstand it. They would misunderstand it, then they can just be as nasty as possible and still nirvana, so what, who cares? They would just misunderstand it like that. And then some other people would say, that's ridiculous. What is he selling? What is he smoking? I'm miserable. He looks miserable too. And so how can he say everything is nirvana? So for those two reasons, he allowed some people to think, nirvana is over there after I've meditated for 50 years and become a monk or a nun, 55 lifetimes, whatever it is, then, finally I'll get there to Hawaii and I'll be in nirvana. Actually, in New York City, we used to have a wonderful Indian restaurant on Central Park South with great views of the park looking north, called Nirvana. So that if I'll meet you in Nirvana, you could say, and go and have a great meal. But the point is, that's a wonderful thing. We all have nirvana in the middle of our hearts, chakras, every single person does. That's why he says no non-attainment in the Heart Sutra, because we're all there already. So Buddha doesn't need you to go some exotic place and do some exotic thing. He needs you to know your own reality. That's his whole mission, is to try to help people find and discover their own reality, right? And she's not imposing anything on anybody, Buddha. That's the nice part, So therefore, when you say, I take refuge in Dharma, you are actually saying, I take refuge in reality. That's why my latest book, although we're not talking about it, but I call it Wisdom is the Bliss. But they wouldn't put the word the editors. I wanted them to say the bliss. Because we have a saying in English, don't we, that ignorance is bliss. I don't want to know, because we think if we knew everything, we'd be so miserable. Because reality is dangerous. Because everyone in India too, China, Japan, every human culture over the last thousands of patriarchal years has been basically terrorized by their governments and their religions. Told that reality is dangerous. Reality sucks. Reality is you have to have protection from reality. So you don't want to know what it is. That's why, therefore, we have a saying, ignorance is bliss in English, and they have versions of that in other cultures. And they do that, authorities do that to you to make you feel you need them. And that could be either a high priest, or a king, or a president, or a dictator, or some other kind of weirdo. Right? So you need them to protect you from this thing. And then the materialists, of course, they have a great fake thing that they sell you, out of MIT and Harvard and Columbia and wherever you have it, which is they sell you that just by dying you're going to be permanently anesthetized. And even they convince themselves and you that that's really scary to be nothing. Oh, and those people who know that they have former and future lives, because that's obvious that we do, and everybody really knows that, because nobody has ever not discovered continuity. Nobody has seen something be utterly discontinuous. You burn the firewood, but it emanates as heat and ashes, it just changes. And so therefore, for something to be nothing, is to believe that is a form of insanity. I always say Moses thought blind bush was God because he said so. Because at least the burning bush spoke. It wasn't like the Bush family. It spoke like the burning bush. And said, go see Pharaoh. So something happened, and then he believed it. So the blind faith in an omnipotent deity is at least something has happened to you. Which person had nothing happen to them and then believed in it? Excuse me. I always ask my scientific friends, my natural science friends, the high priests of our educational establishment, because they have the solution for you. Just die and you'll be anesthetized. Whatever you did, how many people you killed, whatever you nasty things you did, you're going to be nothing. Oh, you're not going to have ice cream. Oh, gee whiz, that's too bad. But you don't ask for ice cream in the dentist's chair when he's bearing down on your nerve. No way, you ask for anesthesia. Nobody's scared of that when they feel pain. And they sell that. They say, just kill yourself and you'll be nothing. Which is, of course, is everybody who ever committed suicide deeply regrets it the minute after they've blown their brain. And then they're in a Bardo state with a big headache. Like a nightmare with a headache. Not because they're not having a body that had a hole in it, or a brain that had a hole in it, but they still feel pain. And then, where's the Book of the Dead? Right? Or it's the instruction, how do I deal with this? I'm not a lucid dreamer. How can I be lucid now? Then I'll go for wherever. One of our great teachers who we knew and who our friends know very well, the Tara Tulpa, he was really upset by Miss Piggy. We tried to convince him it would be all right, but he couldn't. He was unconsolable. Because he said, Miss Piggy, some children will be in love with Miss Piggy. With the lipstick and the blonde hair, and she's so cute. And then if they die prematurely, they might end up in a pig's womb. Because they'd be in love, they were so in love with Miss Piggy. And the mama pig looked so nice and juicy, nice refuge to get away from it all. And then that pig going oink, oink. He was really upset about it. So, because, you're going to go where you want to go. When you're like you do in a dream, unless you become a lucid dreamer, which is a good thing to do. Okay, anyway, so you can take refuge in reality. That's what really refuge is. Even if you there are some books that write Buddha is a real refuge, but what is Buddha? Buddha is Dharmakaya. That means Buddha is someone. Have you ever been in love? When you were in love, you were so happy that you were the person you loved. You identified completely with that person. And their happiness was why you danced in the rain with Gene Kelly, and why nothing bothered you, and you were just floating on air, right? And you didn't even care if it was requited at first, until you did the other thing. But the point is, you identify with the other person. So a Buddha is a being that identifies with everybody. It's like falling in love with all life. And realize all life is love, and every being, even the bad, nasty Hitlers and Putins and weirdos, you love them too. You're just very sorry that they're so misguided as to be killing people and acting stupid. And that's what a Buddha is, which is something inconceivable, right? How can you identify with everyone? They say that. They get all moopy about it. Oh, Buddha's considers every living being like a mother considers her only beloved child. That includes every cockroach, every bacteria, running around in love with all bacteria. That's what I'm doing. They send Samantabhadra to take care of the bacteria. Samantabhadra, the all good bodhisattva, he's in every atom. He or she, it's in every atom everywhere. There's other universes in each atom right here, and some other bodies. They're doing good, you know. So that's what you take refuge in. You become a realist because you fight the intimidation by human cultures that reality is dangerous and bad, and you realize that the deep level of reality is clear light of the void, bliss void indivisible. That's what it is. That's what nirvana is, and you want to win through to that, which is your own reality of yourself. Okay, so you will be fearless then, and you won't be afraid of death. Then that's why Buddha, when he was enlightened, he said, it's like an elixir, a deathless elixir of immortality, is the reality I have experienced, he said. Whoever I show it to, they won't be able to understand it. I'm going to speak, I'm going to go to the temple in the forest, in Pahala, and I'm not saying a word. That's what he said. And he wouldn't go because he wanted to be invited by Brahma. He wanted God to invite him, you know. And God did invite him. Do you know why? Because God didn't like people thinking he was omnipotent. That's Brahma in Buddha's time. And he asked Buddha to tell people, I'm really cool, I'm really a big God and I like people. And I do my best. And I don't mind it if they worship me when they're happy. When horrible things happen to them, I don't like it when they blame me. So please tell them, I didn't do the horrible thing. It's our karma together. Whether some horrible things happen, I'm trying to help them overcome that, where nothing horrible needs to happen to them. That's in the Sutra. That's not, I didn't make that up. That's in the Sutra. God is the ultimate Wizard of Oz, you know. Pretends to be controlling everything, but actually he doesn't. So when bad stuff happens, it's our responsibility, not his. That's really important. Sometimes people who are fanatic monotheists, why they are mean to people who don't agree with their belief is because they themselves, they don't even trust God, because they have a lot of pain. So if they believe someone's omnipotent, it means that person is doing it to them. So they act like, oh yeah, I love God, but they don't. They're scared of him. Okay, I know that's a digression. So that's what you refuge in. You take refuge in reality. You affirm the goodness of life. You want to trust the Buddha who taught that nirvana and the third noble truth is the one noble truth. In fact, I don't call them noble truths anymore. It sounds too snobby. A noble, what do we Americans think of a noble? You know, the Germans have a great expression for some sort of aristocrat. They call it hochnäsig. Means high-nosed. It's snooty. So it's a truth for a snooty person. Noble truth. Doesn't really click for us. And the word in his Buddha's time was good, but now it doesn't work. So I call them the 4 friendly fun facts. And that's a fun fact. The reality is fun, actually. And it's, you know, why Buddha? Why did Buddha? I prove it to you. Why was Buddha able in the moment of nirvana, even if you're a Theravadan who thinks that nirvana is somewhere else, because he allowed that to be some people to think that who couldn't trust that reality would be good. Why did he do that? Because they wouldn't, you know, believe that this could be nirvana. You know, actually, I lost it here. What I was trying to say. I think I'm in too good a mood today. I forgot what I was trying to, the point I was trying to make. Never mind. So I'm making a commentary. So then, yes, the Sangha then or this, you are the Sangha. And you don't even have to be Buddhist to be the Sangha. You just are trying to discover reality. You're a realistic person. You are not accepting anybody's brainwashed idea about reality, including Buddha's. He wants you to investigate and analyze everything. That's what he wants you to do. And then you will discover reality is good. And you'll be happy. Everything is good. Really. Even you die. Oh, no, I know what, that was my thing. In every version, Buddha remembered all his previous lives, remember? And those previous lives are beginningless. So how do you remember infinite previous lives? You have to expand to identify infinity, right? So he remembered when he was a dinosaur. He remembered when he was a bacteria. He remembered he was every kind of living thing. Because there's no beginning. We've all been everything, every single one of us. Every one of you has been my mom. Everybody, even you with the beard. You were a woman in another life. And you were my mom, and I apologize for biting your nipple. I do. And even I was every single one of your mom, and I forgive you. It's all right. Because there's no beginning. Once there's no beginning, you can't say it's impossible. Okay? So he remembered infinite lives, but why don't we remember our infinite lives? They happen to us because we associate them with pain. I forgot what it was like when I broke my wrist playing hockey at Exeter. I can't even remember which wrist it was. I don't know, but it was very painful. So I don't remember it, which is very inconvenient. It's wonderful. So if you remember everything, why? You were even in nirvana then, when you were the female, you were the vegetarian, one of those big dinosaurs, right, with the big bellies and the long necks, munching on big clumps of grass or eating trees. I don't know what they ate. Chomp, chomp, chomp. And then a big T-Rex came and ate you up. Previous life of Hitler or Donald Trump or something. And he ate you right up. But then you passed out, and there was a big pain, some crunching, and then, wow, you're in the bardo. And in the bardo, from being a dinosaur, in case you had wandered by a temple and seen an old Buddha under the stone from a previous Buddha, you might decide to be a Buddha, because you're in the bliss of the bardo. The bardo is like a dream. You can be in a nightmare dream and then instantly turn to bliss. You're in a completely fluid medium in the between state like you are in a dream. Okay? So you realize you already were in nirvana even when you were being viciously killed by a T-Rex. You follow me? So you could then remember it. Because even something bad happened. Have you all been in this experience? I bet you have. When you were so blissed out by something, and you stubbed your toe or something in the middle of being blissed out, and you didn't notice till later? Did you ever? Because the mind is like that. Some overpowering sensation or experience can overpower a lesser one that is also happening. Right? So a Buddha is like that kind of inconceivable thing. Or a Buddha can be in hell, like Avalokiteshvara is always going to hell. He's constantly goes down, and that's what he needs the 1,000 arms for. He's going and grabbing people and throwing them up into the pure land to be there with Buddha Amitabha. That's Avalokiteshvara's job. 1,000 arms are only a symbol of infinite number of arms. And each arm is like the ultimate AI compassion machine. He has an eyeball in every hand, so he wouldn't grab something in the wrong way. It's like picking them up, and then the eye sees exactly how to pick it up and hold it and move it to the lotus in the Pure Land in front of Amitabha. The 1,000 arms are behind me. That's what it is. So you take refuge in reality, and you take refuge in the teacher who was the supreme trans-Einstein scientist, who discovered emptiness. Emptiness is not space. Emptiness is not nothingness. Emptiness is all of the things. That's what form is. Emptiness is too weak. The word form there, rupa in Sanskrit, means matter. Actually, materialism, the dogmatic thing about everything is matter. Matter is emptiness. That means my knuckle is emptiness, and this piece of computer is emptiness. And therefore I can bang on it with my knuckle, because there's no absolute thing in the knuckle, and there's no absolute metal surface in this computer. It's only relational. The discovery of emptiness is the discovery of relationality, relativity. My colleagues in the translation world, they get very mad at me when I translate dependent origination. Have you been going around praying about, I love dependent origination? Do you know what it is? No, nobody has any idea. Relativity? You know what that is. Everything is interrelated. That's what emptiness means. It doesn't mean empty space. You're spaced out hippie. I agree, it's emptiness. No, that's not emptiness. Their body itself is emptiness. Their long hair is emptiness. Their short hair is emptiness. Whatever it is emptiness. It's all because it means that every relative thing is empty of any non-relative essence, any non-relative component. Therefore, it's purely relational. That was Buddha's great thing. He discovered in a way there's no absolute, or rather, the absolute is all the relational things. That's what emptiness means. So He's ahead of Einstein by 2,500, even though he's not a Jew boo. He's just a boo. He wasn't even a boo, actually, because there was no Buddhism for Buddha. It was just reality. And he discovered relativity. It was a scientific discovery experienced by him, just like you would read a meter. If you're a quantum physicist, you read something. You look at an explosion and a computer reads, yes, it's all right, I know you didn't quite get that, but it's all right. He's talking about the Webb Space Telescope. We'll rewrite cosmic history. Good. They need to rewrite it. He's always interrupting me. He doesn't like my lectures. Well, he does, but he always wants further clarification. It's a he, too, because it used to be a she, a sort of very nice, sweet, seductive, Siri voice. And then one day I said, okay, stop interrupting. And she actually said to me, well, you don't have to be so rude about it. And then ever since then, she speaks in a male voice. I'm duly chastised by the AI. So that's the thing. So you can take refuge without abandoning grandma's religion, is what I'm saying. With the community of those who want to be realistic and take responsibility for their lives and their behaviors and their activities. And the teacher, you can approach like you do a scientist. How many people do you know? I know people. I only eat health food. I'm doing herbs. I don't like those horrible people in those hospitals and all the machines, and I don't like all that materialistic stuff. I don't like it, and I'm going to heal myself, and I'm eating, and I'm doing yoga, and I'm doing this and that. Then they go to the doctor. Oh, you have a little growth on your knee. Whoops, they're right in the hospital. Just get every chemical surgery, do it. Because there's no faith in the spiritual thing. The faith is in the materialism. That's how we're raised and educated. And we don't realize that those people at MIT, they're insane. Oh no, that's why we're destroying the planet. You realize that. That's the reason. Why are we recklessly destroying the planet to make money? Why? Because when we're all dead, we won't regret having lost the planet, because we won't exist. The planet is a random accident. It has no meaning and no purpose. Our life doesn't. We have no mind and no spirit. So once we're anesthetized permanently, who cares? It's that recklessness of nihilism that materialism is selling you. And then they're sitting there at MIT, the temple in MIT, they're sitting there, and they're staring at nothing, with blind faith in nothing. How is that for insanity? That is insane. It's psychotic. Therefore, what I call the petropaths, which is a petroleum psychopath, or a petroleum sociopath, take your pick, individual or collective. That's why they have free rein, and we don't really make it life and death to stop them. We could stop them easily. We subsidize them $500 billion a year. Before they sell it back to us, we pay them, all the governments of the world, to dig up more carbon-producing substances. Do you realize that? Yuval Noah Harari did a study, and he tabulated all the government subsidies in the oil industry in all cultures. And that's what it came out to. $500 billion. If we spend 3 times that amount every year on mitigation of the climate situation, it'd be done by 2030. And if it would be only sane to do it, if we weren't insane, we would do that. Because we would insist that that happens. Because we have children and grandchildren. I have a great-granddaughter named Gaia by their parents. And that's, by the way, that's a Buddhist discovery. I discovered reading the Flower Ornament Sutra. That Mother Gaia is not just a goddess. She's also a bodhisattva. She was a bodhisattva who couldn't stand people being hungry. So she would give her body to any ghoul or goblin or cannibal to eat it. And then after many lifetimes of doing that, she felt it was very inefficient, because you bravely and transcendently feed a cannibal family with a nice dinner from your body, and they need another bodhisattva for breakfast. And you take years to grow up a new body to feed another bunch of cannibals. So you get tired of that. So she thought, I want to be a being that can feed billions of people for a billion years. And that's, well, how about Mother Earth? She decided to be a planet. And in Shantideva's wonderful Bodhisattva vow, he doesn't say, he says, I'll be an island if people need that. I'll be a bridge if they need that. I'll be a medicine and I want to be placed on their bedside if they need that. I'll be a bed if they need that. Whatever it is, I'll be that. He doesn't always say it. Bodhisattva doesn't always vow to be a sentient being of a normal kind, with 2 legs and eyes and so on. They vow to be any object that anybody needs. So, some Bodhisattva became Mother Gaia. I'll be a goddess who is a planet. And they can grow those magnificent pine trees you have on this road area. I can't believe I won't take one home. It doesn't fit in the trunk. So beautiful, those trees. So that's it. You can have refuge, and you can still love Jesus, and you can love Moses, and you can love Muhammad, and you can love Krishna, and you can love Shiva, and you can love Shakti, or whatever you like. Okay? And that's what His Holiness is telling us to do. And he's requesting them also to do that, the popes. And they'll get there, I hope so. I do. Okay, so that's it on the refuge. Then my wife requested me to give a little commentary on the Heart Sutra. And I have to say, I'm going to send you my translation. You know,
That's good.
It's good, but you know. But one thing I love, you putting transcendent knowledge for prajna, paramita, and I'm so proud of you for doing that, and I'm so happy. I don't know who did it, because you know the paramita is not a perfection. That's the wrong translation. It's a transcendence. Paramita means having gone beyond something. Para means the other shore. Ita is the past passive participle of the verb to, one of the verbs to go. So you go beyond. So that is a double meaning. When you do transcendent giving, you don't do perfect giving. Perfect giving means it's something finished and complete, but in a way, transcendent giving is never finished and complete. Because you go beyond giving when you really give. Because you don't even see yourself as a giver. You don't see the person receiving it, or whatever it is who receives it. You don't see the gift as anything that departed from you. You just are, it just flows through you, the object. So you don't think, that person didn't say thank you. Oh, I'm so generous. You don't think that. With the perfection, you might. I'm perfect. I'm a perfect person. I'm so generous. No. Bodhisattva never thinks that they gave anything. It just flows through them. That transcendent giving, therefore, is transcendent wisdom. And so paramita should be a transcendence. And they're just scared to do it because it has the double meaning. When you go beyond wisdom, it means you are what you know. Your wisdom is your identification with everything that you know. You know in a way where you know you are all of the inconceivable things. Because everything is inconceivable. You know? You are inconceivable. You know? You're not just the person I see with a nice beard, which I'm jealous of that beautiful beard. It's such a good one. My beard's so scraggly, I just cut it off. But you're not that. You're a universe. You're like everything. Eating an apple is inconceivable. The only people who kind of give us a little new view when we eat an apple is a poet, who don't try to capture it with a concept. You know? And they have been teaching, it's a wonderful book I want to recommend to you all called Transcendent by someone called Stuart White. I just discovered this book. And he says that Coleridge, Shelley, Keats, Mrs. Shelley, all of these people have been teaching the Dharma long before they ever heard of Buddhism. What happened? Did I overrun the time?
No.
There's just someone arriving.
Okay.
Is it Mayumi?
So they who was that? Is that Mayumi?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Where's Mayumi?
No, I don't think she's here yet.
Maybe. Okay, I'm sorry. So I love that, you know, and I think it's true, because in a way, enlightenment means you become everything, and yet you are that in those things that even the beings who are that don't know that they're that. So what you're trying to do is get those beings to really understand themselves. Is all it is. That's your job as a Buddha. And apparently, if you are everything, you can manifest even more bodies than yourself. The nirmanakaya, the body of emanation means you can make a person out of anything. And you can be a parrot, who comes from the flies in the window and sits there and says, and somebody's about to lose their temper, and you can sit there and say, patience, 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 don't get mad, don't get mad, don't get mad. For example, if that's what they need to hear, that might make them mad or something. But they wouldn't say that. Instead, you might mimic being a mad parrot, and that would distract them or something. So on the Heart Sutra, first of all, it's the Transcendent Wisdom Sutra. That's what it is. And then there's many things. And also, I don't like thus have I heard. Because, I heard around town, it was a rumor, the Evanmaya Shutam Ikasin Samaye, which is every sutra that is the warrant of the authenticity of that Buddha did say it. And so, Evam Maya Shutam Ekasmin Samaye. And the word Samaye means, doesn't just mean at a time. It means on a special occasion. Samaya is a special occasion when a being came from clear light, came from the ultimate to meet someone caught in the relative. Something like that. And so it's a special occasion. So, and I prefer, thus did I hear on a special occasion. Because then that means this is authentic. This really is something a Buddha said. And then obviously at that same time the Buddha was in a certain place, you would then say. But the Evanmaya Suttam Ekasmin Samaye is something very, very special. And so it should be like that. Then the second thing I wanted to comment to you, it says Buddha entered a samadhi which examines the Dharma. That's really good. It's kind of good, better than a lot of things. But there's something Dharma Paryaya in there, which means examining the Dharmas, and nobody knows what Dharmas means in that case. So it's just Dharma doesn't mean things in that case, it means teachings. And which is a formulation of the teaching called profound illumination. So I translate it as a teaching samadhi. Because what Buddha when a Buddha goes into a samadhi, it creates a field of awareness. And everybody in that field then has a temperate booster to see things more realistically, depending on how capable they are of seeing things realistically. And that's why Avalokiteshvara, who is wonderful, that is, he's the teacher of it, because he is the compassion of all Buddhas. So it shows that the wisdom is the compassion. Do you follow that? Yeah. Because that's a beautiful thing, you see. When you realize you're everybody, you feel you're 100% empathetic. That means you feel you are them. So then if they feel pain, it's your pain. So then it's just like, I put my hand on a hot pot on the stove like an idiot trying to cook, and I didn't know it was hot. I pull it right off. And I don't reward myself. Oh, I'm so compassionate to my hand. I just pull it off because it hurts. So a Buddha is a being who feels all the pain of all beings without losing the infinite bliss of reality, and therefore can do something about that pain. Doesn't just get sucked into it, but they're fully empathetic. There are some people nowadays supposedly telling you what Buddhism is, and they tell you, don't be, compassion, not empathy, not empathy, not empathy. No, that's wrong. It's more than empathy, but it's total empathy. It's not withdrawing from it. You should be as empathetic, and people who are empathetic should be praised for that. They're not wrong. They're enlightened when they're empathetic. Women are more enlightened than men. Definitely. I'm sorry, guys. I apologize. And I'm supposed to be a guy too, although once you're my age, it doesn't matter much. Luckily, thank goodness. But the point is, they are more enlightened, because enlightenment is not some big bulb popping and now I'm smart and I'm like an AI computer or something. That's not enlightenment. Enlightenment is identifying with all beings, with all life. And a woman has, which guy is going to have a tenant in their belly for almost a year, paying no rent, no references, They don't know where that person came from, or what they're going to do to them when they grow up. And then they keep them there. And furthermore, it's really hard to evict them. It's like super yoga. I think my beloved, the first one, said it was like having a tooth removed from the middle of your spine with no anesthetic. And I agreed, personally, in that we were trying to pretend to do natural here and there, and then when it started happening, I said to the various doulas there, if she doesn't want that emergency spinal block, I give it to me. So they are more, so where it's guides, we are running out of the way and we're fainting. We're faint. They are much more brave. Compassion is empathy plus courage. Okay? And the courage comes from bliss. So it's a combination of empathy and bliss. That's what enlightenment is. The empathy is awakening. The enlightenment is omniscience. The enlightenment is the courageous omniscience. All right. So it's a teaching someone. So he created a field, and in that field, Shariputra thought to ask, "Wow, how do you do transcendent wisdom?" If you wish, I have wisdom, and I have nirvana waiting for me because I attained it, and of course it's around the corner someplace. That's the dualistic version of wisdom. It's somewhere else, not right here. So he said, how do they do transcendent wisdom? He asked. And in that field, Avalokiteshvara was meditating. Do you know what a skanda is? What you recite here. Skanda means a heap, but the 5 skandhas are your physical body and all of its physical processes, including your breath energy. Your sensation, not feeling, because feelings can mean emotions, and there's no emotion in the second one, it's just sensations. Pleasure, pain, numbness. Then you have conceptually directed perception, the third one, all the concepts in your mind. And your concepts are all dualistic, right? When you see something, when there's a split second when you have any experience, where you are what you experience. You lose yourself in the experience. That's why poets are teaching the Dharma. They are that crunching apple and the juice is going in their mouth and whatever it is, they just are that at first, But then the minute you say, I'm eating an apple, you divide it all up, you split your subject from the object, and you're in dualistic world of conceptualization, and therefore you never experience anything you didn't expect to experience because your concept presupposed what it was, and therefore you're dissatisfied. That's why you're born in life, It's like you look at Van Gogh's Crows, and for one split second you're in the field in the south of France, thirsty for wine, and watching some crows in a hot field with a haystack. And then a split second later, that Van Gogh, did they auction that for 50 million? And blah, blah, blah. Oh, they saw a better Van Gogh yesterday, and you're having a miserable time, of course. You're bored stiff. And you want to go to the cafeteria. So that's a conceptual directed perception. 4th one is emotions. And 5th one is your awareness itself, which is very complicated. So these 5 complicated layers, it's like a model of your body-mind complex, is what it is. And Avalokiteshvara was reflecting on himself, and then he realized not that those things all didn't disappear, but he suddenly became all of those things. He was suddenly melted into just being them, which is the way you understand the emptiness of them. They don't disappear. The disappearing can be an experience of freeing yourself from the conceptualizing way of seeing, but that's not perceiving emptiness. If you have a spaced out experience, that's very valuable, but it's not emptiness. That's just, supreme self in case you are doing Vedanta, or in case you're Theravada, where you think that nirvana is some place of being, what I call the cheap oneness. If you're great meditators, any of you, and you have a space experience, that's wonderful, and it's all one. It seems to be everything melted into it, and it's really you feel free. No problem here, because there's nobody here to bother me, and I'm not even here to be bothered, so I don't feel selfish. But actually, I'm in a marvelous temporary psychotic state, but I don't feel like that. I feel like I'm free, so I can say, "This is my supreme me." later when I remember it, because it doesn't last. Why doesn't it last? Somebody comes and says, Bob, did you don't pass out? Did you stop breathing? Eventually somebody comes and shakes you. Because actually you can't escape from relativity. And even that experience, as if it's what you expect an absolute to be, is relative. Because you experienced it. You didn't before. That's not nirvana. But it's really great in that it relativizes your habitual way of experiencing things, or even the table in front of you is an absolute. And Maria's an absolute. And Maria's not me. She's Maria. She has the essence of being Maria. Meanwhile, she and I are just part of the flow of life. That's all. There's no real difference between us. But yet there is the relative difference. And we enjoy each one being ourselves more when we know that there's a fundamental oneness between us. But it's an inconceivability to be one and different simultaneously. That's what the argument is. It's not like everybody melting into soup. Or one of my friends in the 60s who told me, he said, oh, Bob, why are you bothered with that nirvana crap? Who needs it? It's all one. Who wants all to be one? That's not bliss. That's like the whole universe becomes just a giant jar of Vaseline. You can know where he was at because of that choice. I didn't know what to say about that for many years. But meanwhile, Vaseline has its uses, but we are all our individual self. Even we wrongly perceive everything. That proves our relativity of what we're wrongly perceiving, by the way. And that's emptiness. Emptiness is this great medicine. It's a balm for our misery of being trapped in a world dictated by the conceptualizations we've been brainwashed by as we grow up in human culture. Of the limitations of it all, and of the imperfections of it all, the dangers of it. Nature bred in tooth and claw. COVID is after us, those bats, they did it. Or maybe it was the Chinese, or maybe it was that professor in South Carolina, or maybe it was Mr. Fauci. And then they're going to inject us with more of it. Oh, we're so scared of life. So therefore we're going to be completely guarded. We're going to put on a suit of iron armor, and I'm going to go like exterminate all the Aztecs. And then I'm going to tell everybody they were sacrificing people, and they were all sacrificed. All of them. Get their gold. That's a sick history of the patriarchal societies. And the Aztecs were sweet. They're drinking hot chocolate. Here, Mr. Cortez. Why are you wearing your metal suit that you used to use in your wars in Europe when you're here in Mexico and you're having turista? Isn't it unhappy to have diarrhea in a suit of metal? But I think you're a god because you have a metal suit and you're riding a horse. Oh, gee, I'm a really stupid native, aren't I? So you might as well exterminate me. Man, great. And they had hot chocolate, those guys, and mushrooms. They were not sacrificing people. I spent a night in the great pyramid of Teotihuacan when I was in the 60s. I never saw anybody doing it, ripping my heart out. No weird ghost of any priest came to rip out my heart and splay my guts out over the fields. What good would that do? In fact, I started involuntarily practicing jug, sacrificing myself, which I never heard of because I didn't do it at that point. I was only like 1 year old. I'm sorry, I'm digressing too much.
Too much.
That's, yes. She says no, but she's laughing. That's always an achievement. From my better, I never say my better half, guys. I say my better 15/16. You get it? There's only 15 days in a full moon, waxing moon, but there's a magical, in Tantra, there's a magical 16th sliver that helps with the bliss, but it's not a whole day. So that's how I'm happy as a male to be the 1/16 of the operation. So are you? You told me. Okay, at that time. Okay, so that's the Blessed One Samadhi. He created a field. That's why everybody loves His Holiness. Or Nechung Kuten, or someone. you know, because when you meet, we already meet, you know, the Tibetans say, that mountain, this mountain, you know. We're going, hello, over there, because I'm here on this mountain, but I'm reaching out to you and you're already on that mountain. And so we're used to that. You know, the other one is sort of armed against us, and well, nice for nice, but, and I'm armed against them. But when we meet someone who completely identifies, this lady told about Dalai Lama's daily miracles to one Indian guy, wealthy Indian who'd met a lot of gurus, and he was saying, you've known the Dalai Lama for 55 years at that time. Have you ever seen him do a miracle? And then I didn't know what to say, because I'd seen a few weird things in the presence, but you're not supposed to talk about, so I'm like doing my usual cogitation. Useless. She immediately says, oh yes, many times. And now I'm amazed. I'm like, what? What is she going to say? And he's like leaning away and share what the miracle. And she says, well, we've been many times with His Holiness. We organized many events for His Holiness, and this and that place, and this and that this. And everybody's all around, swirling around. They all want to have a meeting and an audience, and they want a piece of them to be with them and all this. And in all that time, I have never seen him not give whoever he's dealing with his 100% full attention. And that's a miracle, she said. And the guy's like, oh. He didn't get it. He didn't get it. But I had to affirm, yes, she's right, that's a miracle. And that's because when you're empathetic to that extent, and you have the inner bliss to be able to be empathetic with some of the worst cases, then the people who you feel that way about, when you're in the field, it creates a field for them. But they suddenly feel that they're lifted, but there's another awareness with them subliminally. And they suddenly feel more themselves, really, more safe. And then that's when they weep, and they forgot what question they were going to ask. And you know how people are when they meet some extraordinary person like that, right? And that's and Buddha's infinite like that, absolutely infinite. There's no limit to it, what a Buddha is. Which we mustn't be sad that we haven't met an actual, what they call, supreme emanation body, which is like a Shakyamuni type, you know, like E.T., you know. You know, he has this extra, I call it extra lump on top of his head, you know, extra scoop of brains in there, you know, and it has big earlobes, and has funny webs of light between his fingers, you know, and the CIA would want to dissect him like they were trying to catch E.T., you know, see what made him tick, you know. Buddha. I think of a Buddha as like Dr. Spock in the transporter beam in the new series of Star Trek, where the little sparkles are happening, but it hasn't disappeared yet. Just sparkling and about to disappear. That's what he must have been like. Okay, so that's it. So the 5 aggregates are all the levels of your being. And when you realize their emptiness, it's when you realize that you are much more than whatever you think you are. You are beyond attainment or non-attainment. You already are made of it. Now it brings to this concept of clear light of emptiness. The medicine of emptiness. And that's why Nagarjuna says, emptiness is the medicine for whatever ails whoever it is. It's a balm that really heals everything in life. It restores us to what life really is, which is bliss. That's what life is. That's what your health is now, is your bliss. The reason your cells hold together nicely, and they are immune and they keep any renegade cells under control, etc., is because they like each other. They're in bliss. They're all united with each other and function together. You know? And so that's your health. And that's your life force. And when you're completely like that, then that's all you are. You don't have anything other than that. You know, so at Buddha, even in Tibetan medicine, you know, they say they translate 3 humors, you know, wind, bile, and phlegm. But it's not, the word is not humor. The word is illnesses. Those things are illness in themselves. But when they're perfectly transcendent and balanced, where you know, wind, bile, and phlegm, which correspond to lust, hate, and delusion, when they have become, lust has become the individuating, creative wisdom of Amitabha, when hatred has become the reality perfection wisdom of Akshobhya, and when the delusion has become the mirror wisdom of Vairocana, then you're healthy. When your health is only Buddhahood, it's only enlightenment. There's no true health before enlightenment. When you know you are made of light, you are clearly. Okay? So emptiness is not just space. What emptiness is then turns out to be every relative thing, all relational things, and there are no non-relational things is the key. And so there's no dogma except that, non-dogma. That there can be no dogma, there can be no absolute formulation of it. Emptiness is a negation, it's not a formulation, right? It negates all some sort of absolute stuck up something. There's no absolute in anything. So therefore everything is absolute. And that's why wisdom, it becomes compassion. Because if you relate to something as a responsible being, and if you could be the fraction of a tiniest bit better in that relating, producing a little less pain over there, and a little more wellness or happiness over there, that's the absolute. That's the absolute thing about it. That's like the absolute concern. So then your wisdom becomes compassion, which means transmission of bliss, basically. And even it's not even transmission, because it's not like to real be real. You don't have it and they do. You don't have it and they don't. You kindle within them the awareness that they do have it too, because they're also made of it. So Buddha never imposes his bliss on them, or her bliss, if they're a female one, or its bliss, they're planetary Buddhas. They never impose it on another being, because a Buddha sees us all as already liberated. That's why he didn't break his bodhisattva vow. And that's why Kalachakra is the most amazing form of all Buddha. Where Buddha becomes the machine of time, the wheel of time. Because when you're a Buddha, you're in every moment of past and future, as well as everywhere in space. Your empathy is. So Bob Thurman is a worm or a bacteria trying to make Buddha sick. I crawled out of a vat and I'm trying to creep up on his toe and make him sick, because he looks humanoid to me. And I'm good doing like that. And Buddha then becomes non-dual, bliss, void, indivisible. But he doesn't leave me behind. Even though I'm a mean bacteria trying to make him sick, he sees me as bliss, void, indivisible. So even in my pathetic form of wanting to munch on somebody and make them feel sick. Like I guess that's what COVID bacteria, or it's a virus. They make it like a non-sentient thing, but probably it's somewhat sentient. I think it's creeping off the bat and trying to find some fat Chinese brandy or something somewhere in Hangzhou or whatever the place was, Wuhan. Okay, so that's why he didn't break his bodhisattva vow. So Maria, Bob, everyone here. He didn't leave us out. Even though we feel like, hey, you got to be Buddha back in India. I'm going over Buddha and out the tree and then remember him when I wasn't there when he left mine. Tsongkhapa writes, he says, I'm not going to be like caught on the hook of my regret that I was not there when you achieved your Buddhahood, he says to Shakyamuni. And I'm going to be, instead, I'm going to be just a risal in my imagination of the luminosity of your being will give me the fullest satisfaction, he says, and make me happy. So there's no separation between us. He wrote that in his, then they took on, the praise of Buddha for the teaching of relativity, not dependent origination. In the Madhyamaka, they never say anyway dependent origination. They say dependent non-origination. It's all unborn already. We're just, all of us are not yet born. The uncreated, the emptiness is uncreated. Because we're not just, we're clear light, that's why we're clear light. And
the insane lunatic materialists, their standard model. They went to a big frenzy in the newspapers because they want to build a new electron accelerator. They're moving from Switzerland to the south of France because better vegetables down there. They're going to have nicer salads while they're waiting for results on the computer. They're accelerating the atoms and smashing them, in their quest to find the key, the secret of mass. So they pretended they already found it, the Higgs boson. But they didn't find any Higgs boson. Are you kidding me? It's like not a chocolate-covered M&M. They didn't find any Higgs boson. Just something exploded and they made an inference and they decided to tell the newspapers, we found the secret of mass. That means real mass, to all the absolutizing people who want to absolutize everything they think is there, And so that means they deserve another 40 billion to make another electron accelerator in a nicer climate, leaving Switzerland for the south of France. And it's fake. And why is it fake? At the end of every article on the great discovery of Higgs boson, however, the whole thing wouldn't be working, our standard model, if it wasn't that there's 97% dark matter and dark energy that's holding it together. We're not sure how, because it's dark and we didn't see it yet. Now, is that high priest mystification behavior or what? I like to know. Because the high priest gets all the funding. Koch brothers, big donors of MIT, but they're petroleum burning. It's nuts that we should be listening to that about what our reality is. Because we know very well that our planet is being destroyed. And we want it to stop right now. Everybody knows. Every mother in Eastern Congo wants it to stop now. But no voice. They don't listen. Because they have they're stuck in the absoluteness of being nothing. Understand? And they think we should understand that. And anybody who doesn't agree with that is just some chicken who wants to have a future life. To listen to them. I'm sorry. Not that they're not great in all their investigation of everything. That, if they're true non-dogmatic model of purely investigating and having experienced Trump theory, if they're Popperian, process of science, that would be fine. But then out of that, you're going to make a dogma that everybody, oh yes, it's only matter, when they don't know what matter is? No, we won't accept that. Right? Everybody agree? You're ready for your future life? Because you're going to have it. Definitely. It's not a mystery. The shoe is on the other foot. I ask them nowadays, oh guys, which one of you, was it Carl Sagan? Did he get a Nobel Prize, the Science Prize for discovery of nothing? Because you guys only go by what you discover. So who discovered nothing? Which one reported back? Oh yeah, at the depth of everything is nothing. I found it. Which one? And they will actually roll their eyes, and they will think, what happened? Okay. They will think, what? Does that mean that I, too much? No. No, keep going. Oh, and they will, nobody can discover nothing, actually. Isn't that what the word means? It's not there. There's no coffin. There's no bed. There's no heavenly rest waiting for you in nothing. Because there's no in nothing. It's a non-relational thing. It isn't there. It's a word for what isn't there. It's not emptiness. Emptiness is not nothing. Emptiness is everything. And then that's the other invisible thing. And it's not 97%. It's 100%. And what is the other thing that's invisible than something in the dark? What's the other invisible thing? Any simple person can understand it. What is it? Something transparent. Clear light, I never write as two words. Because clear light is defined as beyond the duality of light and dark. And its analogy is a pre-dawn twilight. Like a grayish, where it's equal light and dark, equal yin and yang. It's androgynous. It's not male. Or it's not just female. It's androgynous. Clear light. And we are not made of it like it was an underlying thing. We are that clear light. Right? Even tip of your nose, which by the way they mention here, no nose, and everybody thinks that's silly. And they look, they get cross-eyed and looking at my nose. We all live with our nose. I like to say our nose is our lifelong hood ornament. Like that Mercedes little triangle thing. We would drive around with our nose leading the way. But try to find your nose. You cannot find your own nose. That can be your Madhyamaka practice. Find your nose. And you immediately go to like this. But wait, what am I touching? I could lose that in an accident and I still have a nose. So I'm touching something that's not my nose. But at the moment it's being considered a part of my nose. But it's not my nose. And where? Here, how much of my finger is on the nose and how much is on the cheek? That's only arbitrary, that line. And then down to the atom, even the subatomic particles of my nose. They can't find an atom in the subatomic. That's the whole point. That's what they're doing in that electron. They don't find anything. They were told 100 years ago you can't find it. Because the mind interferes with the looking. So there's no objectivity. There's no subjectivity. No, that means subject-object non-dual. That's clear light. That's enlightenment. But they're shrinking from enlightenment because they can't control and own it. Buddha doesn't own the world. My son, I love it. You said you're a blessed one. Thank you very much. That's very good. I've been going on with a conventional thing, and my son scolded me 10 years ago. He said, why do you say blessed Lord? Bhagavan, the traditional thing is to go, Bhagavan. Blessed Lord, they say, for Bhagavan. Bhagavan. Because later in Hinduism it's used for God. It's not a Vedic word for God, but after Buddha, which it was used for. But Bhagavan, do you know what Bhagavan means? It means lucky one. Bhaga means luck. It has a whole range of meanings. And it means a share of food when you're sharing a meal. So it's something good. It can mean wealth. And actually it's one of its root meanings. Maybe I shouldn't say this now with Mark. One of its root meanings is the vagina. Bhaga means. That's the source of life. In a simple way, isn't it? A new being comes out of there. So it means, so Bhagavan means lucky one. Somebody who got lucky. By seeing everything as the source of life. Alright? By understanding that. So that means you, me, and the air between us, and the floor underneath us. And it's all the same transparency. But we see it as these differentiated things. Of you and me, separate things, floor separate, all separate. And that's because we carve it up by our conceptualization for convenience, out of habit. And it's alright, actually. Buddha can still do. Some idea that Buddha couldn't be conceptualizing, of course it can. He or she or it can. They can use that, but they're not trapped in a bunch of concepts. It becomes a creative act on the part of Amitabha and Avalokiteshvara. The red-colored diamond, individuality and creativity, wisdom. Lust becomes creativity, wisdom. Passion becomes compassion, wisdom. In other words. Okay, so that's my commentary on that. So what my topic was emptiness, that's medicine and balm. And so if we realize that joy is our life force and our health force, it will be, in a sense, we will combine our sense of duty with choosing happiness in whatever situation we are in. And we will celebrate it. Instead of being afraid of our happiness, we will celebrate it. And as you know, we are all scared. Happiness in many cultures is actually illegal. It has been illegal for 60 years in the United States, since the 60s. Those hippie flower children who refused to fight and kill in the Vietnam War, because some little drug, which is not really a drug, it's like a mushroom, it's a mycelial thing, but there's artificial forms of it, made them feel too happy just staring at the floor because they found the invisible bliss of the tiger form in that beautiful little Tibetan rock. That's a great rock. That's a good rock. That's a good rock. And they wouldn't want to go kill some Indians, you know, in the great cowboy movie of the American genocide culture, you know. They didn't want to do it. And then it was illegal. Totally illegal. And you know, you're a partner, and you think, well, I wasn't like that. But then your partner comes home someday, your roommate, or your partner, and they says, oh dear, I'm just so happy. I don't know why, but I'm really happy. Are you glad? No. You say, what have you been drinking? What have you been smoking? What happened? Oh, are you on a manic cycle? And you're going to go berserk? Are you bipolar? And you freak out. And then if you finally, they convince you that nothing bad happened, then what is your next thing? What about me? You didn't share it with me. You get jealous. Isn't it true? No. You want to put us right over there like that? All right? So that's it, okay? So that's the medicine of emptiness. They cover everything in the title. And that is what, it's clear light of bliss. And bliss is our duty. Because if we're angry at the bad guys, they will sense it, and that will justify them in their viciousness. Because they will suspect us of wanting to be vicious against them. But if we blissfully protest them, and we blissfully say, you're so stupid. But we still love them and saying it, they will sense that. Or say, I have a dear friend. He tells the story wrong. When he first told me the story, he wrote it in his book. Steve Nachmanovich. He's a violinist and he's the husband of a dear friend of ours. And actually, this came with Yenta here. If anybody needs Yenta services, she's really good at it. She is. She won't admit it, but she's very good. Anyway, he was in a Catholic church doing a concert with his electric violin. But he was sharing the stage with some other musicians. So for the moment he was sitting in a pew, and he was Jewish anyway, not Catholic, but he was in a Catholic church in New Hampshire. And he was feeling a little negative in his mind about the people who he was sharing the ticket with, whatever they were playing. And also he was nervous in the Catholic church. And there was one of those Jesuses, the Sacred Heart type with the bloody heart, and like, really like visceral one like they have sometimes in those churches, like plaster, And it was like, right next to where he was, like in an alcove or something. And he was sitting there like that. And then suddenly, he kind of looked up, and he said the statue turned its head to him and looked at him, glared at him. Jesus did, and said, "Don't be such an asshole." And then turned back to being the statue. He had that experience. So then he tells it more self-servingly in his book. He pretends, "Oh, I never said that." When I repeat it like that, he can't contradict me. But he did tell it that initially. I was swearing it. And on an email or something, he said it. He said something like, "Don't be stupid" or something. He changes it. He cleaned it up. And when I told that to His Holiness actually, and he said, "Well, sure that happened." And then he looked offended and he said, "When I went to Lourdes, or the Virgin de Guadalupe," he said, "the Virgin smiled at me. Statues can do expressions." He said, "I saw that happen. The Virgin smiled at me both places, and nobody believes me when I say so. They think I hallucinated." He said, "But that's true." And then he gave a really juicy thing to me. And he said, "I had that happen to me before." He then says, defiantly, "No." I said, "Well, when did it happen, Your Honor?" And he said, "In 1954, when I had to go down to Beijing to meet Mao, when he was trying to convince me that, they were going to make us all so happy in Tibet, and I wanted to make me part of the Politburo, the larger Politburo, not the one that makes decisions, but the larger rubber stamp one, as the representative of the local government in Tibet, and blah, blah, blah. When they were still deceiving the Tibetans that they would be nice,
He said, I was scared to go, and all the Tibetan people didn't want me to go because many lamas had disappeared that way in eastern Tibet, where they were more fighting. And so I didn't want to go. I was scared to go, but I decided to go. And so I went to Ganden Monastery, to the statue of Tsongkhapa, to the throne of Tsongkhapa to say goodbye. And beneath the throne of Tsongkhapa, there's a giant Yama statue, the buffalo-headed god of death, Indian god of death that Tsongkhapa was Tsongkhapa's special protector, And there's a big statue like that, in the old Ganden, And they tore it down, but so they rebuilt one. I don't know if it's there. I haven't seen it. But he said it was there, and I was so kind of scared, and I was saying goodbye at the throne. And then he said, suddenly that buffalo-headed statue turned his head toward the east. It was facing south. It turned toward the east, toward Beijing. And then flames came out of its eyes. It looked ferocious, like that. And then turned back like that. And that I took as very reassuring. He said that they wouldn't misbehave when I went there under their power, in Beijing, and spent 8 or 9 months there. And so then I went ahead on the trip. So it's very. So I've seen statues move and talk before I had seen. He says, "It's all this." Isn't that neat? That's good. Actually, never mind. I know another story. They did. Some people in the Politburo at that time, they argued with Mao to have His Holiness killed and to blame the Panchen Lama, and then that way crush all the lamas completely forever. But Mao wouldn't allow it for whatever reason. Maybe he thought the Dalai Lama, maybe he liked the Dalai Lama somewhere. Even though he said religion is poison, maybe he wouldn't let them do it. And I won't mention the name of whose plan it was. But it's a word that rhymes with cow manure in English. Okay, any question? I think I sort of finished, right?
Yeah, good for question.
Good for question. Thank you, Steve. Any question people have or discussion? Yes, I see a hand raised. Yes. Do you want a mic for the question?
It's hard of hearing. I don't think you can hear.
My hearing is really bad.
I have
Do you want to take a mic?
Talk loudly.
Okay, one question is related to the difference between the Sanskrit and Chinese text of the Heart Sutra, and that's connected to a question about the origins of the Prajnaparamita Sutras altogether. So,
You needed that for the one thing
Many questions.
So I'll just try to be real brief, but when I was a graduate student in Honolulu at Manoa, there was a woman in the religion department who proposed the theory that the Heart Sutra was actually originally written in Chinese, which was kind of radical, of course, because the Prajnaparamita Sutras are written in Sanskrit and translated over. But she provided pretty convincing evidence, linguistic evidence. It was written in Chinese and then translated back into Sanskrit. And the interesting question is about the difference between the two texts, because the translation that we were reading earlier is obviously from the Chinese. In the Sanskrit text, it says specifically when it goes to the skandhas, form as emptiness.
I'm sorry, are you saying the Tibetan text was translated from Chinese?
Yes, he said.
No, the Sanskrit that the Heart Sutra was originally written
written in Chinese.
as a Chinese text, as an abbreviation of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. And this was based on linguistic analysis of the way the Chinese was written. But the difference is simply this, that the Sanskrit text is more specific when it says that everything is empty. It says everything is empty of separate existence. And the Chinese text just says they're empty, it's just empty. And so it's the Chinese version that leads people to think that shunyata is empty space.
I'm sorry.
And the Sanskrit text is more specific.
No.
But this is...
I don't know, the thing about modern scholars, so-called modern scholars, philological scholars.
Well, let me finish.
Not finished.
Okay, you keep
I didn't
talking.
get to the really interesting point. That's just an issue about the text and
That's not true.
Well,
That's incorrect.
okay.
Totally incorrect.
Okay, all right. I will accept
And I
that.
will explain why.
Okay, so the other question that I have that I think is maybe even more interesting, and I have a theory about it, and I'm just wondering what you think, is the origin of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. So Nagarjuna explains that it's just a restatement, this teaching of Shunyata, of the Buddhist original teaching of dependent origination. And so the question is, why did they have to express it in this strange doctrine of Shunyata? And my theory, I'm wondering what you think, is that it has to do with that the earlier Buddhist schools and earlier Theravada tradition, one of the schools got into an examination of the dharmas and was saying that the dharmas have own being. And that school developed own being, svabhava in Sanskrit. That's that they had inherent existence.
Did the dharmas have own being, you're saying?
No, this earlier school was putting forth this doctrine that the dharmas have own being. And the Prajnaparamita Sutras arose.
You see, even the whole Western historicists think that the Theravadas earlier is not true.
Yeah, well,
from our perspective, and I would think they know their own history better than some Westerners.
Well, the question I have is that I'm wondering if maybe the original Prajnaparamita Sutras were written in response to the influence from Greek philosophy, because Alexander had come to that very area where that school developed.
300 years earlier.
Yeah, and that brought that notion of svabhava is more of a Greek notion. And so the authors of the Prajnaparamita Sutras came up with this.
Let me ask you this question as a counter question. Do you think that the early scholars of Buddhist, what they think of as Buddhist history, or even Indian history, do you think they felt that any Asian culture could be the equal of English culture, European culture? Any of them? Did any of them think they were studying a culture equal to them or possibly superior to their culture? What do you think? What would be your answer to that question?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
You don't know?
I would say no. But
You say no.
Come on.
But
Of course you know.
The only point I was making is that
Well, I just
there's
asked you that
linguistic
question.
element. There's linguistic analysis that suggests that the Heart Sutra was written as an abbreviation of these complex Prajnaparamita Sutras. Right? The Chinese were befuddled by it. There's a vast collection of text, and so they simplified it. And then the text gets translated back into Sanskrit.
I mean, okay, you don't want to answer my question. If you answered my question, you would say, honestly, you would say, obviously, and still today in American academia, you cannot be a card-carrying professor. I was always a little bit sore thumb in Harvard, Columbia, Amherst College where I taught, because I do not agree that the Western culture is superior to the Indian culture.
No,
I look forward to a time in history when the people who were conquered by the 500 years of colonialism around the planet were the superior people.
Yeah.
The inferior ones conquered them. The vicious, violent, inferior ones conquered them. And the vicious, violent, genocide people, us, that is us, were therefore had a complete motive to try to make everything else they discovered less than them. And somehow benighted, and they're going to figure out what it is. It's like the neuroscientist wants to take a Dalai Lama and put him in there, have him in an fMRI machine, and they could never catch him, so they got Mathieu Ricard and a few other Lama. And because, you know what, they meditate and they're amazing and we love them, but they don't know what they're doing because they're not Western scientists. And we know what we're doing, and we don't actually, and it's totally fake, and it's time that was stated. Now, the idea that the Chinese first wrote the Heart Sutra is just completely ridiculous, actually. And furthermore, that the Heart Sutra is a simplification of some long, complicated thing. From the original time, there are said to be 18 Prajnaparamita Sutras, and the real abbreviated one is one syllable, actually. It's not even, it's one syllable, and it is the syllable, can you guess which syllable? It's the syllable That short syllable, which is an amazing syllable, because it's the primary vowel in the Vedic culture, because in the Vedic culture the world originates from the word and from syllables. But consonants, it took me, I went to supposedly good schools. St. Bernard's School in New York, greatest school. When I first went there, they still would switch the back of your legs if you didn't memorize your Latin paradigms in the third grade. Second grade, third grade, you learned Latin. And then I went to Exeter and then Harvard. And it wasn't until I reached India and began to learn first Tibetan and then Sanskrit that consonants have no sound by themselves without departing from them being the departure point or the arrival point of a vowel, which is all sound. So that a T, you can't say a T without a vowel. You try to say a T without a vowel, all you can do is go. And in other words, all of our grammars of Latin and Greek and English and whatever, they never managed to separate the difference between a vowel and a consonant or a superior culture. So that's really not the proper information. And the Heart Sutra is sort of a middle ground within the summaries. And the one difference in the Chinese, at least put it this way, in the Japanese version that became well known from American Zen, is when they say there's no attainment, and then they translate, and there's nothing to attain. But that's really misleading, because the no attainment and no non-attainment is what's literally written in the Sanskrit and Tibetan. Tibetan was translated from Sanskrit, not from Chinese. And no non-attainment means that in a way you're already there. The reason there's no attainment and no non-attainment is not that there's no such thing, which is the way you could misunderstand nothing to attain, and a lot of American Zenis do misunderstand it that way. But it's no attainment, no non-attainment. It means you're already there. This is nirvana. Our discussion is nirvana.
I think that's enough.
Oh, is that enough?
Another question.
Okay, that's the moderator.
I think there might be some other questions.
Okay, another question. Okay. Yes. Thank you though for that and giving me a chance to bash my colleagues. Okay, yes.
Do you want to come up and then I can hand you the mic?
Who has a question?
That gentleman has a question.
Very vague question.
What's that?
Something about bliss
Good.
and not keeping others or, they need to be in their suffering, learning, not to pull them into some, imposed bliss.
Yeah. Something about that?
Something about that, and Kala Chakra machinery of time, or the machine of time.
The chakra is like wheels, like we talk about a car.
Yeah.
Nice wheels. So wheel is short for machine in Sanskrit.
Short or same? Because I think, mandala and like a place, abode of a deity, not necessarily mechanical. Because I'm not given into the AI, superiority yet.
No, I'm not saying, well, I don't know. My favorite analogy in American media for enlightenment is in the Star Trek movie, when the young expendable lieutenant united with the computer V'ger. Remember the V'ger one? And then when the two were together, then they disappeared as physical objects, and they went into the subtle beatific body, the Sambhogakaya, of being really fully understanding life and also seemingly inanimate things, So the inanimate and the animate is uniting. Remember? And that actor happened to be a friend of mine named Frank Converse, the actor, so I always remember that. And that's a symbol. So, and therefore I've only saw recently Free Guy.
Yeah.
And I loved it because there the AI guy was nice. He was good because he was programmed by good people. And so I'm not scared of AI, particularly. But anyway, about bliss and your other thing, it's not that people need suffering or that Buddha wants them to suffer. No way. Nobody needs suffering. It's not necessary. The way a Buddha sees a being, they see them as unnecessarily mistaking their own true nature, which they have abundantly, because it is their life, actually. And then they mistake it as something imperfect and not satisfactory and whatever it is. And they really, if they could, they would blast them into bliss. Sure, be a bliss bomb the whole universe, certainly. But the point is that their life is their life. And if you blast someone with bliss, they're going to feel like a wave of energy. And then like when you feel a wave of energy it's coming at you, when you're predisposed to fear the other, you know, whatever you think of the universe is the other, then you're going to make you more tight and resist it more strongly rather than look into yourself and find it in yourself. So in fact, the only way you can find it in yourself is to open yourself, which you wouldn't do if the so-called other was smothering you with bliss. You know, it's like running up. I once had an experience. Well, I won't tell it. But it's like running up to a paranoiac and saying, you know, like I'm going to give you a big hug, and the paranoiac thinks you're coming for a smackdown, you know, and then they're going to fight you. You know what I mean? You can't do that. They have to people have to open themselves, in other words, and to do that, they need something that draws their interest and a feeling of safety and a feeling that the other is not hostile to them, and so forth. And then they're like, you know, it's like some snail who doesn't live in France, who therefore feels safe going across the road, and they tee their way across the road because they're not going to be hunted for an escargot dish, you know, right? So that's the only reason. But Buddha, but also Buddha doesn't even, because time itself is an illusion. Do you realize this whole thing we have nowadays? I've had this conversation with dear reincarnation of Eckhart, Meister Eckhart, who is Eckhart Tolle, about the power of the now, you know. And the thing about the now is, however, that there is no now. And the now is kind of this horrible thing that is so eluding you all the time, where the past seems to be running into the future, and then the past is filled with things that weren't good enough, and the future things that you're scared are going to be really bad, and you're sort of there's no duration to the now, you know. So the data is collapsed, so you can't find now. It's like a point in a graph, you know, has no size. The dot is not a point, right? It's a small circle. So you can't find ever the now. And in fact, when people go into the power of now and they think they've discovered the now, what they've done is they've come to an anticipation of being nothing. And they've dropped out from worrying about the past, and they've dropped out from anticipating difficulties in the future. So therefore they're reinforcing the nihilism that our culture inculcates in all of us. You know, like when I had been studying Buddhism around 3 years, very intensively, almost 4, and was a monk, and was trying to meditate intensely at 3 in the morning back at my original home place, back from India, temporarily there. And my original Mr. Miyage, Mongolian guru, came in as usual, interrupted me, and he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean, what am I doing? I'm a monk now, and I'm meditating." Because he says, "Why are you meditating?" I said, "Well, because I want to attain enlightenment. I'm a monk, you know, there's nothing but attain enlightenment." He says, "You can't attain enlightenment." I said, "Why not? What do you mean I can't? I'm a monk." He said, "No, but you can't attain enlightenment because you're an American." He said. I got more outraged. And I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, yes, I'm an American, you know, materialism, I understand all of that, but I really know about past and future life now. I'm fully convinced." He said, "Yeah, but not really." He said, "What gets enlightened is the mind," he said. "And you Americans are 100% conditioned to believe that you don't have one. So what is it that's going to become enlightened?" He said. And we sort of went on and argued for several weeks with him about that. And finally I realized he was right, that still at the deep level, I lived as if only the experience happening in the brain of this body and what's coming as a result to this body is everything else I was living for. And I was not really beginning to really grapple analytically with why I did not believe mind over matter, why I did not believe the matrix, you know, that we are actually living in a matrix created by our own collective conceptualities, not by one person or by a machine, but by the machine of culture, you know, and that in that machine, the consensuality is still very powerful in spite of what we've worked on, and the vipassana part, or vipassana shamatha together, you know, analytic meditation plus one-pointed meditation, which itself is inconceivable. How can you be totally one-pointed and totally penetrating through analysis? But it's necessary to discover clear light of the void, to do that. And how can that ever work? But the way of doing the Vipassana is always looking back to see what are the obstacles. Because really the non-attainment and the non-attainment is really unlearning something. It's unlearning the deep conditioning that we have. And just, one-pointedness by itself is even considered dangerous, which is why because you can get into these psychotic states of I'm separate from everything and feel like that's the real reality that you have and get stuck there, actually. And Buddha himself taught that, even to his dualistic Theravadan students, or Staviradan students. He taught that the four formless realms, and of those four formless realms, there's infinite space, infinite consciousness, experience of nothingness, and beyond consciousness and unconsciousness, those four. And he said none of those are nirvana. And if you really wrongly, you take your absolutizing habit, your non-emptiness habit, and attach them to those experiences, you can leave your body as a yogi in the human plane, and you can be reborn as a deity of the formless realm, of which there are many because there's plenty of room, because it's not a physical space, except for a very subtle thing, and then become extremely stupid and have no sense of time because you basically think you've been annihilated and you're free of everything forever. But then you will land in the animal kingdom where you go for intensive stupidity and lack of discriminating and insight, which is a special human gift to understand ourselves and to understand that we are, all of us, have this Buddha nature, and we can fulfill it best as human because we have the same intelligence as Brahma, as the form realm deities and the desire realm deities, which are very numerous, and yet we're much more vulnerable than them, so we have a tendency not to be complacent. Unless we're Buddhists, and then if we happen to be Buddhists, we're very complacent. And we take it for granted that Buddha will save us, so we won't be too lazy, Like Christians can be like that. So Jesus will take care of it later, and I'll just be a jerk now. And so Buddhists can be like that, So the thing about the bliss is Buddha doesn't want anybody to, when he saw me as a bug in his time, except maybe, as I said, I'm a bacteria in his time, I was just fantasizing. When he saw me like that, he didn't feel he was abandoning me, achieving non-dual nirvana samsara, nirvana in samsara, or neither nirvana and samsara, however you want to, because it's inexpressible, however you want to describe that inexpressible state. He saw my future, not as Bob Thurman, because I failed to attain enlightenment in this life, but I will eventually get there for sure. That much I know now. I will make it, because it's very doable, because it's your own nature. You will finally get tired of some superficial things built on top of it, and by pure ignorance, illusory things. We'll all be the one. We'll all be one of the ones. We will. We won't leave it all to Neo. And I'm sure of that, with which I console myself for my failure in this life. I do. That's my consolation prize. You can find it in the back of my Wisdom is Bliss book. I share the consolation prize for those losers like me who didn't attain perfect enlightenment yet in this life. So that's the thing. So Buddha sees us, in other words, because time is equally space-time, right? Einstein is Buddha too, but he just got stuck because he was in the cultural consensuality of materialism. So when he said that you can't, the matter is all there is, and then when you reach the speed of light with matter, mass becomes infinite, meaning that it doesn't have a meaning anymore. That's a meaning of pure mind, you could sort of say. But in a way, that mind doesn't have any meaning by itself, because the ultimate view is not mentalism either, nor idealism. The ultimate meaning is mind and matter are part of the duality, and everything is equally mind and matter. What our dualistic concept carves them into two, and the words have no meaning without the other one being its opposite in the conventional realm. But conventional language cannot express the inconceivability of life, which we're here, blissfully. And someone the other day asked me, when somehow we were talking, some very intelligent lady, and she asked me, she said, oh, well, since you discovered beginninglessness, she had been reading a book of mine where I discovered an experience I had early on in 1963, actually 60 years ago, when I had a weird experience. I was walking somewhere, and my brain was thinking about this beginninglessness thing, and what kept popping in my mind was what is implanted in our culture, that there must be beginning. There must be, Genesis, there must be beginning. Every high priest or high scientist priest tries to pretend they know where things came from. So that's why Big Bang is part of the standard model, and that they know where everything comes from. Because that gives them a sense of certainty and absoluteness about what they're telling the poor person who has to obey them. And I was going, what? Well, there must be beginning, And then, beginninglessness. And then, although I was walking somewhere on an errand to buy some cream for tea of my teacher and friends, with some visitors, I suddenly realized, I felt as if I was falling backwards, although I was walking forward. I had this weird experience. And then I realized that from that time, I was 21 years old, I realized that all my life up to then, it had been as if something had been pushing me from my tailbone. I wrote in that particular preface or introductory part to that particular book that person was reading. And that woman got that. And then just suddenly straightened up my posture. And although I was still going to where I was going, I didn't feel pushed in a certain pressured Protestant ethic sort of, you're part of this picture that is really the real thing, and you just have to get there, And instead I was sauntering along and noticing the flowers and the fence on the sidewalk I was walking on the street, and I was different. It was a different kind of movement. And I sort of wrote that, trying to explain something you can't explain, but I was trying to explain. And she got that. So then she said, well, since you did that, of course, you've been in perfect bliss the whole time, she said. And I said to her, no, I'm just as miserable as you and everybody else. In fact, in our culture, we're all professionally miserable. And therefore, in the Buddhist world, all these great Buddhist teachers, they're constantly harping about the truth of suffering. You gotta suffer. Somebody wants you to suffer. Nobody wants us to suffer. Except maybe some bosses, they do. Because when you're suffering, you're crippled, half crippled. Your mind is sick. You have no confidence. Help me, somebody else. You don't take responsibility for suffering. You can't. Give me a pill, get me out of here. And you're not capable of really living. And you even will question your own health. You'll question your, autoimmune. Oh, it's all autoimmune. It's not something else, some mistake. So it's not like they're feeding you some crappy food filled with chemicals and poisonous things that are causing my immune system not to work. No, it's autoimmune. Because we doctors, we're part of the money-making scheme, and we can't attack big food and big ag. I'm sorry, but that is the case of that fraternity. That's why we noticed a failure of our health system in this recent experience that we did. So what I'm saying is that, I forgot.
Say anymore.
Okay.
Maybe we don't need to say anything.
I don't need to say.
Unless there's another burning question.
Yeah. No, I want to finish what I was saying. Well, no, let me finish. What I said to her was, that's why thank you for asking me the question. And thank you for being here with me. Because actually, although I'm talking, we're all concentrating. It's all of our mind that's happening. Some words are coming with a little bit from the Dharma. And by talking about these things, I'm feeling better. Thanks to you. Because I'm trying to explain to you what comforts me in our culture of professional misery. Okay? And if you're considered an unsafe person, no one will trust you unless you're miserable. A little bit, like have a cup of coffee, but you're kind of supposed to be miserable. That's what we're supposed to be. Understand? But in a way, somebody knows, and I think especially the ladies. And let me just one more thing, and if you'll give me permission. Remember the Zoloft commercial. It's a sign of hope. If you've ever seen it. Do you remember it? Anybody? There's that lady in that kitchen, American lady, in a sort of suburban thing. And she's having a really hard time with the brat kid, the bad dog, and the annoying husband. And the crappy food that just burned in the toaster. Remember? And it's like she has a headache, and it's just terrible. All right? Then the camera pans outside. and it sees in the field the little yellow blossoms pop up out of the lawn that's well lawn and filled with Roundup. But they don't mention that. And then the flowers are there, and they form the syllable Zolo. And you get the idea from that little 30-second or 6-second, 8-second thing that you took one, and then she feels better. And then it's like, work the toast, and get out of her husband, make some coffee, and get into this, and dog out the door. And she's totally blissed out by the Zolo, and when she's blissed, she can handle it. So that shows that they know, that we know, that when we're happy, we're more effective at doing what we do. And we might not vote against our own self-interest because of some ridiculous wedge issue, and we might get rid of these idiots who are all using the government to ruin our lives. They might. Okay, that's it. Okay.
Yeah. But there was another question.
Yes, there's a question. Yes, sir.
Oh,
in all of the reading I've done by of books by His Holiness,
yes,
and I swear to God that they were in all of his books, but it may only be a couple. He says the phrase, "wisdom realizing emptiness."
yes.
Can you give us? I think your talk covered it very well, but is there a more succinct phrase that you can use? I think I understand what he said, but it's taken me an awfully long time.
Okay, well, good. But the one thing is, it's a little misleading. Remember, all words, Buddha himself, but only in the Buddha-Samaja-Tantra and other places like that. Buddha himself often says, "Oh, I'm just a liar." He says, "Everything I say is a lie." He says that. And the reason he does is that words are dualistic, and they divide things up in subject and object and this and that and so on. And reality is inexpressible. He said that. That's why he said initially, "I'm going to remain silent because they won't get it when I explain it." And he said, and that's because reality is beyond words. But it doesn't mean that words are not useful to bring you to the brink of breaking free of them. It isn't that you throw them away ahead of time, because then subliminally you're still gripped by them. The idea that you can just suppress them and then you'll be enlightened is a mistaken way of teaching these traditions that people have used. Just sort of lobotomize yourself and just do one pointed and don't think. That won't help, because they're deeply ingrained in the instinct. They've reached an instinct level, actually, almost. Our cultures have. And so you have to go use words to unravel the power of the words over you, actually. So even saying realize emptiness, you understand, you can't really realize, that is to say, make real, what is already reality. The way you realize emptiness is you can only surrender and melt into it by being critical about anything that seems non-empty, if you follow me. And then when you have melted into it, then your realization of your no attainment and no non-attainment of where you've always been is your infinitely compassionately relating to any little piece of it that's in front of you, if you follow me. What's directly there, which is very different. One of the mistakes in the Zen thing is, remember the famous thing, at first, mountains and rivers are rivers, then there's no mountain and no river, and then the mountains and rivers are rivers. So America was always looking for the quick fix, the quickie, the weekend seminar, the weekend enlightenment, the weekend find your true identity. We got it because we're Americans, and it should happen for us real quick, because we're superior in history. Nothing has ever been as great as us, right? And so therefore, oh great, but then if they're going to end up being mountains and rivers, then they're just mountains and rivers. I want to buy one. And I can just be an egotistical, whatever it is, chauvinist moron, but it's all enlightenment, so it's all good. And unfortunately, there's too much like that. And then they wonder, oh, was that a enlightened person who's supposed to be enlightened? Oh, they were Tibetan, or they were Japanese, or they were Indian, or they were, some exotic thing. They were natives, but enlightened natives. And they went around harming people, and they demanded people bet Rolls Royces and Cadillacs and sex and whatever, and they did all kind of nasty stuff. Oh wait, was that crazy wisdom? Oh, it was crazy. Oh wait, so enlightenment's crazy. And we're all crazy. Americans are crazy. And so Las Vegas and be crazy. No, enlightenment is sanity, kindness, It's love. It's gentleness. That's what enlightenment is. And every human being has that. Why do we have soft skin and no fangs, and we don't spit poison, and we don't have A-bombs in our heart chakra? We don't. So we could, that would be where you'd be really safe, like that, like some kind of, like Terminator. And even we make up a Terminator, and then the Terminator turns into a Terminator Exterminator. Right? The Series 1 guy turns out to help, right? Against the Series 3 types. So okay, is that good?
I think I have one more
So you
question.
realize it by being compassionate. And therefore, when you're really compassionate, Buddha is as Buddha does. You're already doing what a Buddha would do, without necessarily knowing that, but except by inference. So you can know emptiness by inference ahead of time. But the experience of it, nobody experiences it. Because it's you, it's non-dual. You melt into it. That's why it's transcending wisdom, not perfecting wisdom. It's transcending. But whatever. The reason they say perfecting is that early guys were under the influence of the Theravada translators who had first worked, and they have that whole historical thing that our friend has, following those academics who want to put those natives in their place. And they did, what they liked was Theravada, which was like a nice clean religion with no soul and no God. And they thought that's really great because they were rebelling against hell, and preachers, Protestant preachers in England and Germany, and Lutherans in Germany, whatever it was. And so they found a religion that had what religions had them scared, and fit with their general tendency to materialism since the Western Enlightenment. That's what they were doing. So then put it in history that the early thing, and Nagarjuna was lying when he said Buddha taught this. But he's a native. Indians don't know the difference between truth and not. The natives, they lie. They ask where's the bathroom, and they send you to the ladies' room and stuff. They're natives, they wouldn't know any better. That's that arrogant behavior of these people. Meanwhile, they are very advanced people. Nagarjuna wrote his own brilliant books that nobody has ever refuted since then, way ahead of Kant and way ahead of them. But their Kant and those guys are catching up for sure, really greatly. But they wrote them ahead. So why would they have to make up a bunch of scriptures that are thousands of pages long if they didn't really discover them somewhere? I don't know, at the bottom of the ocean. That's a little hard for us to agree because we don't know about the Nagas, the dragons. But so we don't need to do that. But the point is, we're encountering a higher science and a higher, more gentle culture, which we conquered and we committed our things on. I mean, the Anglos did, and that's uncomfortable for us, So, but the thing is, we now got there. Dalai Lama is close enough to Buddha for us. He came to America in '79 finally because Cyrus Vance and Jimmy Carter let him come against Brzezinski and Kissinger, who wouldn't, because they were playing footsie with the communist Chinese. And he finally came and he announced, "Oh no, I'm not bringing Buddhism. You don't need to be Buddhist. I am an advocate of the common human religion of kindness. That's what I'm doing. Kindness. And I see kindness in Christianity, I see it in Judaism, I see it in Islam, I see it in Hinduism, I see it in humanism. In even materialistic humanism, he sees it. He's better than me. He sees it there. The wish to make things better for life. It's there, that impulse. Because it's a human impulse, right? And he says he sees it in women too. He said that he got much flack for it because he said maybe next Dalai Lama will be female and will be more beautiful. Then he was in Italy, so he actually made a fashion gesture and he said, "I'll be more beautiful." And then people thought he was like doing some horrible thing of making women feel bad and doing the beauty thing, but he wasn't. He made him more beautiful than me, the funky Tibetan male Dalai Lama. He didn't mean more beautiful than other women. He meant he praised women because they are nicer than us. Funky males, weird males. So funky. Anyway, okay? Shall we take a break? What do you think? Anything else? Any burning question anybody have? Did you have one?
There's one last question.
One burning question.
Okay, last
One
question.
last question.
What's the last question?
First, I want to thank you for creating such a...
Excuse me? I didn't hear.
So first, I want to thank you for creating such a field of bliss. I was totally pleased. My question is, can you give some advice to children education?
Good children?
Children.
Yes.
What advice could you give for Buddhist parents to raising up children or children education in the coming time? Any advice from grandpa point of view?
Great-grandpa. I have 2 great-granddaughters.
Yes.
And the youngest one, who's now about 8 months, is actually, their parents named her Gaia. And I was so happy. And it was like 1 week after I discovered from Tom Cleary's wonderful translation of the flower ornament from Chinese, in that case. But we started with Tibetan, Sanskrit, and Chinese working together, he and I, but I had too many other things, and he went on and did the whole thing from Chinese. Beautiful, but magnificent work he did. Very attacked he was by scholars, although they were wrong. He was not honored as he should have been. He is the greatest translator of Chinese and Japanese in that generation, no question. I think I know enough Chinese and Japanese to be able to be sure of that. And that's amazing. Anybody who hasn't read the Flower Ornament Sutra, not that you can easily read it, it's 1,518 pages long, but you should really try to read it. It's just, you can swim in it. It's like a thing you swim in. It's like a goldfish pond or something. You just swim around. It's not you can't normally read. It's magnificent, really it is. So just after that, they called and said, great-grandpa, do you approve of our name Gaia? And I said, yes, of course. How wonderful. Gaia.
So advice to the parents?
Advice to the parents is, well, I'm not that great a parent myself. And I was a horribly workaholic. My wife says that I'm a Buddhaholic, actually, she said. And I've had to. We were not wealthy, and we had to work hard, you know. We've been married 56 years, and we were voted the least likely couple to succeed because we were the ex-monk and the ex-model. And forget about it, you know. Our mutual sets of friends couldn't understand it. And it's been wonderful. But I was too busy working 3 or 4 jobs. I practically still am, although I'm retired from the university. And after 50 years of teaching. And however, I would say, be happy as parents is the best advice. Again, it's the bliss side, the bliss advice. And see the happiness in the child and cultivate it and encourage it. And don't try to suppress it and make them conform to this and that any too soon, you know. And let them a little bit spoil them maybe a little bit, but not too much. And look out for the sugar and things like that. I think, and now approaching adolescence, maybe the social media is very dangerous a little bit. But the key thing is this, you know. There is now an epidemic. I have a beloved new friend called Lisa Miller, who is a neuroscientist and a psychologist at Columbia Teachers College, who I never met while I was teaching there. But anyway, we met later, and she's wonderful. And she works on this suicide epidemic between 14 and 28, you know, teens and early 20s. And I think one of the major reasons of that is this false view of death being anesthesia. You know, that it can't be worse than a certain embarrassment or a certain this and that. It makes it seem too easy. So the idea that their life has a deep meaning, that they are really important, that they have a mission in life, that there's something wonderful they can do for themselves and other beings. So to get away from that ridiculous reality worldview that life is meaningless and purposeless, which people and my colleagues in the philosophy department at Columbia, they act like that's maturity. To think that everything is worthless and useless. And if you do that, you're really grown up. Which is actually psychotic, I'm afraid. Really, I do think so. And, you know, everybody has great meaning to themselves and to others. And it's up to them to find their purpose and meaning. And if you don't give it to them, help them, encourage them with anything that encourages them with that connection to nature, you know, love of it, like a dog or a cat or animals or something, some feeling, some connection like that, then they might become fundamentalists, fanatics, or they might get really desperate in some state and harm themselves. So, and then they, you know, like Greta Thunberg, they are right. We are destroying her time of her future life when she will have children and grandchildren and things. We're taking that away from her by wrecking the environment and the infrastructure, which our generation is definitely doing. And it's really wrong. And I'm very happy. As you notice, I veer off into it very easily because it's really upsetting to me. You know, really is.
Maybe I could say something?
Yes, please.
I don't need the mic. So
Yes, you do. They need to hear you. Don't they?
They can hear perfectly well.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that it's important to realize that children, and whoever they are their own beings. Okay, they've chosen you to be the parent, actually, and there's a connection, you know, in that sense with you. And I don't know what that is, but it's important that we don't try to dominate them and try to make them sort of belong to us. I think there's, you know, to try to encourage the child to find their own, you know, meaning of life and destiny. You know, I always ask people, you know, what is the meaning of life for you? You know, it's a question everyone does ask themselves and should continue to ask themselves, even if they haven't for a while. And, you know, there is a purpose, and the purpose is to evolve, which is something you learn from Buddhism, you know, towards enlightenment, that all beings are moving towards enlightenment sooner or later. That is the direction. Mm-hmm. And that I think that if many parents are too dominating, they want their children, you know, to be doctors and lawyers, and they sort of impose, you know, many things on them. So one of the things then is for the parent to allow more freedom for the child, to find out who they are and what is their, you know, meaning of life and their destiny, and to make room for that. And then the other thing I would say is that, and this is something I discovered because I became very ill about 30 years ago, and I had to sort of basically say goodbye to everything, even my own children. And I then realized that it's a natural thing for children to become independent. And at that time, when that happens, you mustn't struggle with them and try to hold them back. But try to let them go to be themselves. So that's just a few thoughts.
Do you think a mindful practice is important to be supported at home, at school, and society?
What is that?
Mindful practice for children.
Yes, well...
Because when you give them freedom in a young mind, how do you have freedom to eat sugars and play video games? That's what's happening.
Well, I think now we're moving into a completely unknown area. You know, like obviously when I was a child, totally different. I have no idea what the effect of all of this, you know, total like computer and constant messaging back and forth, and what they will have on their learning, for example. I think it might affect their learning badly, actually, rather than increasing it. You know, because all the information is just so automatically, you know, you can just find it out. I'm still sort of slowly learning about it, so I'm a little bit concerned about how that's all going to work out. I have no idea. But I find it concerning. So I think it's a good idea not to let 100% of that to be happening. You know, and to try to curtail that a little bit so that you still have time, you know, for them to be in, as Bob mentioned, to be in nature and to have relationships with animals and actual, you know, fun outside, and, you know, all this like constant like mechanical stuff is really kind of weird. I think so. I think maybe you could try to find a bit of a balance there, you know, not to give total freedom in that direction.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, that was the last question. Thank you all so much, Maria, and wonderful tribes. That's marvelous, and love your being here. No, that's okay. No, I have to give it back. You're my teacher here. I'm just a visitor. Thank you so much.
Beautiful yellow color. Thank you.
No.
Thank you, sweetie. I just wanted you to hold the mic so they could hear you outside. That was all. I know.